So, after the unfortunate escalation between Israel and Iran, many ask the question in financial markets about, okay, where is money going? Where is the smart money protecting itself? What are the actual assets that are the true safe havens during those circumstances? And the answer might be a little more complicated than we think. And has actually Bitcoin failed at being that one of these assets as well? So this is what we're going to be discussing today. But first off, it's important for us to keep things in perspective because it's very easy to fall prey to narratives. So when you see something like this, okay, oh, actually, it's pretty easy. Gold is the safe haven here. It's going up 1.58%, and Bitcoin is definitely not. People are fleeing from Bitcoin because that's just a leverage play on Nasdaq, for example. And it's not really that simple if you zoom out a little bit to understand. But the most important part is at this point, feelings and headlines and the TikTok attention span, so to speak, that can work against you during these times. So you see many of examples like this. I'm not bashing anyone. It's just something that you see a lot. Jacob King is one of the best at bashing Bitcoin online, for example. So war erupts in the Middle East between Iran and Israel, and Bitcoin crashes like dead weight. So the truth is, Bitcoin isn't a safe haven. It just thrives on calm markets propped up by tether fueled speculation and so on. So this is a clear argument over there. But you see this over and over again. It is important to understand that Bitcoin shows its true colors as Israel attacks Iran. So it's not an alternative currency. It's not a safe haven. It is a risk asset, just like another tech stock. But I would like to invite you to, I'm not here to tell you exactly how to think. You need to think by yourself. However, it's important for us to contrast on what's happening in other assets as well, and especially how Bitcoin is becoming a little different than we think. First off, let's go to the true risk assets, right? So let's go to the S&P 500. You can clearly see that we had a huge correction in April that got a lot of people scared, and right now we're just almost back to the game, right? To 6,000 points, and of course, this very last candle on the right is our war candle, so to speak, right? So it's the conflict. Of course, everything can go from now on, many developments as we speak. But yes, there was a negative effect because it's really a true risk asset, despite not being that much of a correction, right? We have to wait and see what happens. The true play was crude oil, right? WTI absolutely skyrocketed here, so to over 71. But you can see how when we talk about macro liquidity and how countries, and I talk a lot about that in other videos as well, we have a synchronized effect of lower and lower economic activity that was already happening before 2025, before Trump, before tariffs, before everything, before these conflicts, which was a demand story. But now it shoots up as a clear geopolitical play. So we have to wait and see how that goes. And for sure, gold has been doing its thing. So we're again almost at all-time highs, and it shows the long-term play of thousands of years. So nothing to prove itself. It's a great asset as well. But look at Bitcoin, which is pretty interesting here. If you zoom out, I always love to see the perspective. So there was this correction on April, but that already caught my attention on not being like a huge correction, like 60K or even lower than that. So it had a correction like the S&P, but not as much. But look at it now. If you just see what's happening at this very moment with BTC. So if you see this here, and I asked you, okay, when do you think, based on this chart, when is the war actually happening, right? Or the conflict actually happening? You probably would say March or April, right? So it has corrected, but not really that much. We're still above 100K, so which is pretty interesting. And this actually has a very interesting component that creates some sort of a new kind of asset that is taking over monetary mechanics and the macro liquidity. But before we jump into those, we discuss many of those macro scenarios on our channel, but here we dive much deeper into our Bitcoin intelligence reports, and this is our very latest one. So a lot of good stuff here from our team with Cena and also Wizard, a lot of on-chain analysis and also monetary mechanics as well. So this report is available to you, so you can click the link in the description below and also use the promo code on the link as well. Okay, so this is really where we're going to dive deeper into that, and so you understand exactly what happens to Bitcoin when you understand what happens to liquidity. So coming back to our Bitcoin chart. So this here shows that Bitcoin is maybe going towards something else than just a leverage play on the Nasdaq index. And this graph here shows us some clues. So it's a great work done by Michael Howell at Cross Border Capital as well. And this here shows a little bit of how the behavior of Bitcoin is very different from last year, because everybody was just screaming around that it's just a leverage play on Nasdaq and it's just a risk on asset as everybody as anything else. But it's not really. So if you see, there is a lot of global liquidity that influences Bitcoin, and I totally agree. I mean, I would actually argue that Bitcoin is one of the best barometers for world's liquidity as of today, or even the humor of the macro markets. So a healthy Bitcoin price would be a healthy worldwide liquidity as well. But there is still some influence on investor risk appetite. So you see here, 22.2% of that decomposition, like the systemic influences on Bitcoin, would just be that play, that leverage play, but it's not that much. So that may explain a lot of the behaviors where when S&P goes down, for example, Bitcoin also goes down, but maybe not as much as before. And this is an interesting component. This is a little bit of a gold-like component that they're able to see. And it doesn't matter if you like Bitcoin, you probably like it when you're watching this channel, but even if you don't like it or you don't agree with the fundamentals, they have not changed. So, and at the same time, you see some more and more correlation between Bitcoin and gold, not only on price, but also on the behavior. I would argue that you see a lot of that competition between those two assets. And of course, maybe you like both. Maybe you just like gold. Maybe you like Bitcoin, for example. But those two, they become more and more complementary, and they have different properties, right? So one is digital, one is physical, one can be transported in an easier way, the other one can't. And that is actually becoming more and more prominent into macro liquidity as a great way to provide like exit valves to the liquidity that is just being created from fiscal dominance in the biggest countries like the US and China. And it's a way for you to leverage on that. But at the same time, it's becoming more commodity like as a global asset or reserve asset or currency, whatever you want to describe it. So it's extremely important for us to follow that behavior over time so that we see how it's becoming just something else, like a Bitcoin asset, a global asset that has great components from gold, great components from financial markets to take advantage of these plays, because Bitcoin allows you to do that, which is extremely fascinating as an asset that exists for less than 20 years and still has a very small market cap. So when you see the long-term charts based on liquidity, based on what's happening with fiscal, Bitcoin becomes extremely interesting for us to keep having a look at that. So coming back here, is it really melting that way, or just stopped being like a safe haven? I would argue actually the contrary, because many of these markets, especially on sanctioned countries, like you see Russia still, or Iran, to move billions of dollars at the same time without any influence from SWIFT systems or other systems as well, Euroclear, that are part of the Eurodollar system and could have influence by the US, for example, right? You are able to move those via Bitcoin as well, which is extremely interesting to see. So that kind of holds, and it provides more and more forces to really show that Bitcoin is really becoming way more global and way more valuable than we think.